everyone, and welcome to my teacher presentation. So before we get started, I have a few things that I want to go over. First off, if I was teaching this in a classroom, which I probably will use this presentation, honestly, I would have it on a smartboard or whatever kind of like presentation technology I have in my classroom to go over it with them like in a place where they can see it, because this is a little bit of lecture mixed with group discussion. So I want them to be able to reference it when they need it and also just have it up where they can see it. But I didn't have any way to do that, so I still wanted you guys to be able to see the presentation and see each slide so you can kind of feel like you're a student. But then I also wanted you guys to actually be able to see me teaching. So I thought that the best way to do that would be to do this where I could record myself as well as the slides. So that's what we're doing today. I also just noticed that I put that I was married. I am not married, so I apologize for that, but that's a minor detail. Anyways, the second thing is that for student feedback, I'm going to be teaching each slide as I would in the classroom setting. And then after it, I will say, if there is class discussion after the slide, I will tell you what I expect them to say, what I think they probably know at that point. And so that will kind of be like my student feedback. And then lastly, right before this, they will have a bell ringer. This will be the first thing we start with at the beginning of the day. So I will be starting this presentation by giving them, like asking them about the bell ringer. So just so you're caught up, that's what will be happening. So let's go ahead and get started. Flipping on my teacher brain. Okay, so good morning, boys and girls. Today we are going to be talking about finding theme, as I'm sure you guessed from your bell ringers. So your bell ringer today was to list anything you know about theme, anything at all. So we're going to write some stuff on the board and just brainstorm a little bit, and I just kind of want to know what you guys know about theme. So just start throwing stuff out. At this point, I kind of expect them to know maybe it's the main idea. Maybe it's the tone, whatever else, but I expect them to have some knowledge, even if it's vague, about what theme is. Okay guys, so those were all really good answers. So theme is basically the big idea. It's the moral or a lesson or the message hidden within the text that you're reading. So an example is The Three Little Pigs. That story is very popular. I'm sure most of you know it, but if you don't, there were three little pigs who one built his house of straw, another built his house of sticks, and then the other built his house of bricks. And the big bad wolf comes along and blows down the house of straw and sticks, but is not able to with the bricks because it's bricks. So one of the themes in that could be that hard work and patience pay off because, the little pig put patience and hard work to make his house made of bricks. So that's hard. And we'll kind of talk about how you can determine that later on. But a story can have multiple themes. So The Three Little Pigs can have other themes, but this is just a possible theme that you could pick out and use evidence from the story to support. So kind of looking at that, how do you think you can find theme in a story? Like, what kind of things do you think you should be looking for in a text when you're reading and when you're trying to determine what that like main message is? So at this point, there will be a short class discussion where I kind of expect them to maybe not know a ton about this, but maybe say things like looking at the characters, the scenes, the settings, kind of looking at like the main idea and similar things like that. Keywords. I expect them to know a little bit about this, but not a ton because it can be a little difficult. So good answers. So let's talk about how do we spot it. So first, easy, we're going to examine the title. Look at it and just say, like, does this tell me anything? Sometimes it might just tell you who the characters are, but that's still helpful in determining the theme. In The Three Little Pigs, it's an important detail to the theme that there were three pigs. One of the pigs happened to do something different than the other two, and because of that, his hard work and patience paid off. So that, even though it's not the theme, it's an important detail. So you can definitely look at that title, see like, what does this tell me about the story? What might it tell me about the theme of the story? So next, you should look for repeated words or ideas in the text. So for example, in The Three Little Pigs, a constant repeated idea is the big bad wolf blowing down the house. It happens 2 times and then he tries to do it again, but he can't. And so that should be like a little flag in your head, like, oh, this has been repeated, but now it's different. And look at that detail and think, like, does this tell me anything about the theme? Is it important? Is it, like, should it be something that I'm looking at and trying to figure out why it's different? And in the case of the Three Little Pigs, it was important that it was different because it ends up being part of the theme. So look at those repeated words or ideas or repeated things that change and kind of say, is there a connection between what's being repeated, what's being changed? Like, what's the connection between those things? And can it help me find the theme of the story? And then lastly, ask yourself, what does the author want me to learn? So what is the message that the author is trying to give me? What am I supposed to walk away with in this story? Am I supposed to walk away with the fact that the big bad wolf had brown fur? Or am I supposed to walk away with the fact that that last little pig worked really hard and because of that was able to keep his house? So look at those things and think, what does the author want me to take away from this? Okay, so we're going to try one together now. I'm going to read this next short story out loud on the board. And while I'm reading, I want you guys to think about what details are repeated. Look at the other important details, the keywords, the title, and think, like, what's important about these? How do they connect? And then at the end, I want you to consider what the author wanted you to learn from the story. What's the main takeaway? What did the author really just want to give you before you're leaving the story? So the story that we're reading is The Bald Man and the Fly. So already that's a title if I've ever heard one. So as we're reading, think about the title, think about some keywords, some repetitive things, and let's go ahead and read. A fly man bit a bald man on the head. The man tried to shoo the fly away, but the fly landed on the man's head and bit him again. This made the man furious. He slapped his head to squash the fly, but the fly flew away just before the man delivered a stinging slap to his own head. The fly landed on the man's head a third time and laughed at him. You would hurt yourself just to get back at me, he taunted. The man was so enraged that he tried to hit the fly with the rock. Instead, he knocked himself senseless to the ground. So, learning what we've just talked about, let's start with the title. So, what does the title tell you about the story, if anything? At this point, I expect them to say, tells us about the characters, what's going on, things like that. Okay, good job. Also, I will say, if I had a smartboard, I would be highlighting this. Okay, so let's talk about next some repeated words, ideas, details. What kind of things do you guys see being repeated? Okay, things like the fly bit the man on the head. He tried to shoo the fly away. That's the constant repetition. Good job. So if the fly keeps landing on the man's head and biting him, what keeps happening as that keeps happening? Like, does the man just keep shooing him away? What changes? And they would respond, like, he starts to hit himself harder, then he hits himself with the rock. Exactly. Okay, so those are some repeated details. Those, the man tries to shoo the fly away, but it keeps getting more aggressive as the fly keeps biting him. So what kind of things, like what message do you think the author is trying to say here? And then I would expect them to say something along the lines of something about revenge. Revenge only hurts the person executing it, something to that degree. And also having them talk about why, what details pointed them to that, and explaining their reasoning. And if they gave different themes and not mine, I would kind of say, like, okay, all good. One theme that I noticed was that revenge only hurts the person that is giving it. So you can see this by, the man keeps hurting himself to get back at the fly, but the fly is not affected at all. The man ends up hurting himself. And so that's, that is repeated throughout. And so that shows throughout that the fly's just chilling, he's just living his life and he's not being affected at all, but the bald man is. And so seeing that, you can definitely look at that and say, okay, revenge. And he's trying to get revenge on the fly. And it's not working. It's only hurting himself. And so that's kind of how you can come to that conclusion. So you can, like I said, a story has multiple themes, but to make a theme, you need to have supporting textual evidence. You need to mark where your repeating details are, or maybe there's a certain sentence that, really looks at the theme and really kind of defines it. For me, maybe the last one saying that he was so enraged he tried to hit the fly with a rock, and instead he knocked himself to the ground. Looking at those two sentences, that definitely highlights the revenge aspect. So definitely, you know, highlighting, marking up, and making sure that you have a support for your theme, because you can have different themes, but you need to have support for them. Okay, so we discussed what the theme is. Ooh, excuse me. And so now we're going to practice. And we practiced together, so I want you to get into groups of 3 and read the short story, The Golden Touch, that I've handed out to you. I want you to highlight and annotate the passage, noting key details. And then together as a group, I want you guys to determine what you think the theme is. I want you to then, I have it on your instructions, but I want you to give 2 key details. I want you to mark 2 key details in your passage, specifically that kind of prove what your theme is. Okay, so at this point, as a class, they would be reading this short story, which I've included here, just so you guys can see this is the actual handout I created for this, where they have the instructions to read it and then write in the provided area at the bottom, and then label 2 places in the story that supports their theme. So I gave them King Midas and the Golden Touch, and then at the bottom they are going to answer what they think the theme is. And then at the end of the lesson, this will take about 15 minutes. And at the end of that, I kind of want to come back as a group and discuss just for a few minutes what they thought theme was. And then I'm going to collect those with their exit ticket. So their exit ticket, I also created this. I'm really proud of it. I'm sorry. But so in this, I want them to name 2 things that they learned about theme, as well as something that they need more help with. And so that can kind of help me think, okay, they got this concept, but they didn't really get this. So, in terms of like when we talked about so independent learning, that's kind of when they're in groups, when they're reading the article or the short story together and answering it. That's their own kind of practice. And then their guided practice is when we read The Bald Man and the Fly together, and we go through it together and we highlight the details and go through each step. And then closure of the lesson is this exit ticket, where they tell me what they've learned and share at least one thing that they needed help with. So this kind of lets me know this is where they're at, this is what they might need help with tomorrow when we go a little farther in the lesson and do more things with it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I know it's a little different, but I appreciate you listening, and yeah, just have a great day.